now 6:31, and today's date is Monday, December 11th, 2017, and I call to order this meeting of the Goose Creek CISD Board of Trustees. Before proceeding with tonight's agenda, I would like to remind everyone in attendance that the meeting is being recorded through audio and visual technologies. At this time, I ask that everyone silence or turn off all electronic devices. Thank you very much. Ms. Woods, was this meeting properly posted?
Yes.
And do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Let the record show that we have 5 board members in attendance. At this time, we're still waiting on Mr. Laredo and Mr. Goodpoppy to continue. Okay. We're going to start with open exercises. Dr. Duarte, please proceed.
President Richard, school board members, Mr. O'Brien. The opening exercises for the December 11, 2017 board meeting will be presented by students from Austin Elementary School. We will begin the opening ceremonies with the prayer led by Pete Poppy. Everyone please rise.
Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity we have to come together tonight as a board to celebrate the many successes of our students and our staff. We ask you to be with us this evening as we represent our community. We make decisions that we feel are in the best interest of our students and community as a whole. We will be led by thy guidance, by thy spirit. When we do without have us do it, we represent our community. Bless those who are still on the way as we watch our protected and their safety. Thank you for the opportunity we have tonight to have the parents here to see their students perform for us to see. We ask you bless the parents and children as they leave tonight, that they watch over, protected, and they're covered. These things we humbly ask in the name of Son Jesus Christ. Amen.
The pledges will be led by Asana Gordon and Lillian Bullard.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
You may be seated. The following students will perform I Saw Three Ships and Baytown Song written by Carol Colvin. With us this evening includes Ashley Acker, Jaylee Anderson, Areli Avila, Carolyn Carsey, Ava Cáceres, Sarah Cedillo, Delaney Dobbs, Asana Gordon, Bree Hildenbrand, Grace McLean, Jada Menard, Kaylee Potts, Kendall Seago, Miley Wood, and Lillian Bullard. Students are under the direction of Carol Colvin and Principal Michelle Duhan.
to the students that with us tonight. If you're sitting, please stand. If you're standing in the back, just wave at us. We thank you for coming out tonight. With the board's permission, I'm going to reverse the next two items on our agenda. We're going to do our recognitions and acknowledgments before we hold our public hearing. Any objections to that? Dr. Duarte, let's move on with recognitions, please.
We will begin our recognitions with the TASBO Purchasing Award of Merit presented by Margie Grimes, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you and good evening. The Texas Association of School Business Officials, commonly referred to as TASBO, their Award of Merit for Purchasing Operations recognizes school districts' achievement in implementing best practices in the area of purchasing. The honorees demonstrate professional purchasing operations and share their best practices and policies and procedures with colleagues throughout the state. In determining their Award of Merit designees, each application was reviewed by a team of reviewers, including various procedures and practices, including the following: organization, policies and procedures, contract operations, staff training and certification, use of technology, communication and management of cooperative programs, plus, where applicable, P-card systems and warehousing. TASBO will recognize our district on February 27th at the 27th Annual TASBO Conference in Fort Worth. We are so very proud of our staff in the purchasing department, and we want to acknowledge and introduce them and to recognize their achievement in obtaining the Purchasing Award of Merit. So, the Director of Purchasing, Joseph Villalba. Senior Buyer, Brooke Lackner. And Purchasing Specialist, Ashley Poe. They work very hard, and we are so honored, and we appreciate all of their hard work and dedication. Thank you.
The following students have received recognition for their nomination to the 2017 American Legion Bluebonnet Girls State. Bluebonnet Girls State provides participants the opportunity to experience government at all levels. Females in their junior year of high school are nominated by their school faculty, interviewed, and then selected by representatives of the American Legion. With us tonight, we have Shirley Dyer and David Nickerson of the American Legion Auxiliary Post 323, and I'm going to ask them to come up. All right, the first student I'd like to recognize is from Ross S. Sterling High School, and that would be Bryn Benoit. You want everyone together or separate? I have 4 girls. Okay. Also from Sterling High School, we have Casey Benskin. Robert E. Lee High School, we have Kayla Contreras. And Niall Stewart. The following students have received recognition for their nomination to the 2017 American Legion's Boys State. American Legion Boys State provides participants the opportunity to experience government at all levels. Males in their junior year of high school are nominated by their school faculty, interviewed, and selected by representatives of the American Legion. Representing Goose Creek Memorial High School is Anthony Brinza. From Ross S. Sterling High School, we have Andrew Beck. From Robert E. Lee High School, we have Drayton Sherrill. And we have Christopher Fontenot. Attendance is an important factor for our district, not only for funding from the state, but for the benefit of students to receive instruction. Each 6 weeks, an attendance report is generated to identify the attendance percentage for every campus. Campuses that either meet the district attendance goal during the 6 weeks or are the top campuses are recognized. Our top 2 elementary campuses for the second 6 weeks are Victoria Walker Elementary, having 97.52% attendance, and representing Victoria Walker are Ismael Santana, 5th grade, Braylon Rodriguez, kindergarten, Pablo Rodriguez, 3rd grade, Camila Garza, 4th grade, and come on down, guys, Caden Johnson, 4th grade, Daniela Garza, 5th grade, and Principal Monica Juarez. Representing Dr. Antonio Banuelos Elementary School with 97.12% includes Lucas Moore, Kinder, Andrew Rincon, Kinder, Julian Johnson, 4th grade, Cooper Moore, 4th grade, Caleb Rincon, 2nd, Megan Zamudio, 5th, and Principal Renee Meyer. Our top junior school is George H. Gentry Junior School with 97.02%, and here to receive their recognition are 6th graders Michaela Zapecki and Evan Cotter, 7th graders Julian Nieto and Caleb Baskin, and 8th grader Morgan Holmes with Principal Kathy Holland. Our top high school is Robert E. Lee High School with 94.51%, and here from Lee High School are Chris Garcia, Senior Class President, and Tess Graham, Senior Vice President, with Principal Joe Farnsworth. And we had one of our campuses meet their goal, and that is Point Alternative Center, who had 82.56% attendance. And representing Point include Mark Gonzalez, Blaine Williams, Miranda Doyle, Jennifer Cardenas, and Principal Tricia Times. Lastly, we would like to recognize Covestro for their generous donation to the summer engineering camps for STEM students. They have donated $5,000 to support this event. With us tonight is Jennifer Walsh, Head of Communications for Covestro, Jennifer, would you please come up and take a picture with our board? And Lindsay Merrick is here also as our CT specialist for the area of STEM.
Before purchasing leaves, are you still here? We're going to do a purchasing part. Oh, here we go. You just thought you were through.
Not fast enough.
Congratulations, ma'am. Proud of the work y'all have done.
The light. You need to move it probably. There you go.
There you go.
All right, the next item on our agenda is citizens' participation. This is the time that the board will hear any public concerns or public comments.
I believe we had a public hearing that we reversed order in. We need to come back to the second.
Okay, all right. I jumped ahead. We have to go back and pick up a public hearing of the annual Texas Academic Performance Report for 16-17.
So the purpose of the state providing the TAPER report is to provide information that is consistent across all campuses in the state of Texas. It's also a tool that we use to address school performance improvement efforts. So when we look at our accountability ratings for the district, what we know is that all of our campuses met standards, so we do not have any required improvement schools. We do have 8 focus schools, and we did present to the board on how the state put that interesting list together. We've got the PEG list. We had Horace Mann and Lamar Elementary who were on the PEG list. Both of those campuses have come off of that list. We have Harlem Elementary that's identified in the area of writing, and we have Baytown Junior School who's been identified in the area of social studies. We also receive our PBMAS staging, and that looks at 4 components. We've got bilingual and special education at a stage 2, and every student succeeds ACT and CTE at a stage 1. The worst staging would be a 4, then a 3, so we've brought our bilingual and our special ed down to stage 2 at this point, and it's a work that we're still focusing on. When we look at our TAPER report and our school campus report cards, they look at all of the data, and so what we've provided for you is a comparison between the district, Region 4, and the state. So this slide represents how we're doing in the area of reading, English language arts. You're going to see very, very close to the state and the region in 5th grade. What we've done is we've identified those areas of gap, and that would be at our junior school level. Also in the area of math, again above the state and the region in 5th grade. Again, looking at our junior school, specifically 6th and 7th grade in the area of math, and we are above the region in Algebra 1. We also look at a comparison in writing, and we have 4th and 7th grade. Social studies is tested in the 8th grade level and U.S. history. Focus on 8th grade. And then we have science that's tested in 5th and 8th grade and biology. You're going to see us above the state in 5th grade and very, very close in biology. And then we get a comparison looking at all grades. So if we look at every single test that was administered, and then any child in the district that took a reading, a math, a writing, a science, or a social studies exam, with our strongest areas being math and science. So we always like to talk about some of the assessment changes that we experience. So when we look at our 16-17 school year, the state eliminated the STAR accommodated and the STAR L, and they offered an online STAR assessment with embedded support. So if you were an accommodated tester, you now had to take your assessment online with those accommodations. They also shortened the 3rd through 8th grade test. The goal was that 85% of all students would be able to complete the assessment within 2 hours, and for grades 3 and 5, and within 3 hours in grades 6 through 8. They've also changed the performance level descriptors. So students will receive a report that says they are approaching grade level, which is a passing standard. They're meeting grade level, and that's the final level 2. And then they have mastered the grade level, and that if they're at the level 3, or what we formerly knew as commended. They also eliminated the short answer responses for English 1 and English 2 assessments, and that was not notified to the schools until almost the end of the fall semester of that school year. Some of the accountability changes that we experienced this last year is when we look at our campus comparison groups, they're now also looking at the number of students who are served through special education, and they're also looking at the number of students that are enrolled in an early college high school program. So what we do is we looked also at the percent of students that hit the master's grade level. The first few slides you saw were approaches. We were passing the test, now are we passing at that higher level? And so we can see some of those areas that we lag a little bit behind the state and the region. And what we've been doing is started some collaboration groups with our pre-AP, AP teachers to really focus on some of those higher skills. We also look at met or exceeded progress, and this is where the state measures where a student performed the previous year and how they performed the current year. And are we making the amount of growth that we would like to see or expect within a school year or above? So what you're going to see is 55% of our students demonstrated that progress between the 2 school years, and in math, 64% of our students demonstrated that progress. Then the TAPER report has a section that focuses solely on bilingual and ESL students. And so when we look at our passing standards for every single bilingual or ESL student in the district, what you're going to see is very, very close in the area of mathematics, in science, and we are not far from the state scores when we look at this special population. It also looks at our attendance rate, and so what you're going to see is 1415 We had 95.2% attendance, and in 2015-2016, we dropped 0.2 to 95%. We're always a year behind when we look at our attendance rate data. We also focus on STAR participation, and this is a federal expectation that we test a certain percentage of our students, and you're going to see that we had 99% of our students participate in the state accountability. 94% of our students are included in the accountability. So we had 4% that were considered mobile, and so they were here after our snapshot, and we had 1% other students who were not included, and then you have 1% that's not tested. We also look at our longitudinal data, and that's our graduation rate and our continuers. We're looking at a 5-year report, so this would be our class of 2015. So this would include students that continued that 5th year to graduate. And you're going to see Goose Creek is above the region and the state when we look at our 5-year longitudinal data. We had 0.8% receive a GED, 0.6% of our students continued on. We had 5.3% who dropped out, and then when we look at our graduates' GED and continuers, we're at 94.7%. The state also looks at the graduation plan that our students graduate under. You can graduate under a minimum plan, or you can graduate under recommended or distinguished. We have one more cohort, 2016-2017. The students this year are graduating under HB5, which is your foundation plan with endorsements. So when we look at our data in this area, we have more students graduating under the more rigorous graduation plan than the state or the region. They also look at our dropout rate, and when we look at junior school, 7th and 8th grade, we had less dropouts than the state and the region, and when we look at 9th through 12th grade, we are at 2.2% with the region. Then they focus on advanced courses and dual credit course participation and completion. Again, we're looking at 15-16 data, so this would be a year behind last year's graduates, and we're looking at 11th and 12th graders. So you're going to see any subject, we're in line with the state and region. We excel in the area of mathematics, and we have a larger number participating. And then in science, ELA, and social studies, we are below the state and the region. What I can tell you is we are starting dual credit science at one of our high schools this year with our hopes to expand to the other 2 campuses. Goose Creek Memorial. They also look at the college readiness indicators, and so we look at what percentage of our students are college-ready graduates in ELA and in mathematics, as well as AP participation and AP examinees scoring above the criterion or getting a 3, 4, and 5 on their AP exam. They also look at the number or percentage of our students who are meeting TSIA requirements, so you can meet the score to be able to start your dual credit classes through SAT, through ACT, or through the TSIA. So when we look at our TSIA, we are above the state and the region in both ELA and mathematics. They also look at higher education data, and now we're going back to 14-15, so not recent data, but certainly data we can look at. We had 55.1% of our graduates enroll in Texas institutions of higher education. This does not track every student, just those that attend a public school in the state of Texas. And we had 54.9% complete 1 year in their college courses without remediation. Then it looks at student information. And so last year we had 23,837 students in attendance. It also provides the ethnic distribution. And so what we've seen is an increase in our Hispanic population with a slight decrease in our white population. It also breaks down our student information based on sub-pops and economically disadvantaged. So last year we were at 64.4% of our students qualifying under economically disadvantaged. 15% of our 23,000 students are English language learners. A little more than half of our students are identified as at risk. We have 27.5% of our students participating in career and technical education. 8.2% are gifted and talented, and we have 9.9% identified as special education. They also look at retention rates, and these would be any child who's not identified special education, and what you can see is every grade level except second grade, where we were tied with the state, we have a lower retention rate. It also provides data on our staff. So it looks at our teachers by the highest degree that they hold. And so you're going to see a lower percentage having no degree to a bachelor's, master's, where we have 24.2%, a little bit above the state, and we are in line with doctorates. Then they provide data for teachers by years of experience. And so we look at beginning teachers, and then 1 to 5 years experience, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, and over 20 years. So the majority of our teachers fall under 1 to 5, and then 11 to 20 years experience. And the average years of experience in the state, they're at 10.9 years, and Goose Creek, we're sitting at 10.3, so very, very close to the state average. Also, average years experience within the district, we're 1/10 below the state on that average. We are a little bit below the state when we look at the percentage of our staff who are teachers in the district. The state average is 50%, we're at 46.9%. We're a little bit below the state in professional support, 0.5%. Campus administration, we're below the state, 0.4%. Central administration, we're below the state. Educational aides, we're below the state. Auxiliary staff is where we are above the state, about 5%. When we look at teachers by program, and this all has to do with how you code your staff through PEAMS, you're going to see the percentage of bilingual education in ESL. We have a higher percentage. We have a higher percentage of CTE, lower in compensatory education, much higher in gifted and talented, and that really has to do with how we're coding. And then you can see regular ed and special education. So we look at the number of students per teacher, and Goose Creek averages 16.1 students per teacher compared to the state at 15.1. So we have a higher teacher-to-student ratio. Our turnover rate is lower than the state by 2%, and our instructional staff percent sits at 59.2 compared to the state at 64.6. Then we've got data on salary by years of experience. So you're going to see that Goose Creek is above the state average considerably in all areas. And then we do have a requirement to provide some summer school data. And so for our summer school program, last year we served 1,814 students in our elementary programs. We serviced 959 junior school students. We serviced 1,154 high school students who earned 1,486 half credits. And so our focus is credit recovery with our high school summer school program, as well as end of course testing. And some new summer school courses or classes or offerings that we had in the summer of 2017 was we provided attendance recovery for K through 8. With a focus on attendance, we need to make sure we're getting that instructional time. And then credit recovery courses at the high school, we offered some face-to-face instruction versus the online. So based on the campus's greatest need, we made sure that we provided that face-to-face instruction. Any questions at this point, public or board?
On the slide with the percents by category, like auxiliary was the bottom one, 5% points higher. Typically, just curiosity, auxiliary is usually, my understanding is food service, maintenance, custodial, grounds. Okay, that's all I want. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? From the general public? This is a public hearing, so if there's any questions from the general public, you may come forward and ask questions at the microphone at the podium. Hearing none, I will close this public hearing at this time.
Thank you.
For the record, our two tardy board members did show up. Mr. Laredo showed up at 6:34 and Mr. Ben Poppy at 7:04. 7:05. Thank you. We now have seven. We now have seven board members. Now we're back on schedule. We are on agenda item 5, citizens participation. This next item is citizens participation. This is the time that the board will hear any public concerns or public comments from those that have signed up to address the board. Before hearing such matters, I would remind each speaker that you are limited in your presentation to 5 minutes and that you should not identify any teachers, administrators, staff, or students by name in addressing your concerns or comments. Pursuant to state law and board policy BE legal, the board cannot consider or take action on your concerns at this meeting unless it pertains to an item on the posted agenda for the meeting. Any deliberation or decision on an item that is not posted for consideration at this meeting shall be limited to a proposal to place the subject on the agenda of a future meeting. Our timekeeper tonight will be our secretary, Mr. Laredo. Mr. Laredo will give each speaker a 1-minute warning when you're down to your last minute. Our first speaker is Mr. Brian Walenta.
Good evening. I wish to thank you for the opportunity to come here this evening and speak to you on a subject of school start times. My name is Brian Walenta and I teach at Robert E. Lee High School. I've been in education for 31 years and 16 years at Lee High School. Last year I was honored as the Campus and Secondary Teacher of the Year. I've been on ILC for 2 years and currently the co-chair for ILC. I state these things because that gives me the ability to work with teachers from across the district. This year I had the privilege of speaking at the new teacher breakfast in which I told new teachers to GCCISD that this district is a family and a great place to work. Growing up in my family, we would sit around the table and talk about family problems or major decisions. All would be heard and discussions be made. Which brings me to my point. For the past 2 years, the idea of changing start times has been talked about in GCCISD to help attendance and achievement scores. For 2 years, teachers, staff, parents, students, and community members have been talking about this very subject. In recent surveys, a majority of teachers, parents, and students have said no. In fact, the 2 school districts that GCCISD reviewed saw no real increase in attendance nor achievement. Why are we then considering spending millions of dollars to do something that shows it may not work? Why are we thinking about a change in which will hurt working families? Why are we looking at a change in which why are we looking at a change in which we'll push after-school activities later than they are? Why are we looking at a change in which students will not have the ability to work after school or be home when their little brothers or sisters come home? Why are we thinking about a change in which teachers will possibly be looking outside the district for new jobs? Recently, a survey was done of Robert E. Lee High School students, of which they were asked, do you have a job after school and would changing the time negatively impact your job? 43% said yes. Do you have any responsibilities after school and would changing the time negatively impact that situation? 68% said yes. How do you think changing the times will affect your attendance? 43% said it would not affect it at all. How do you think changing the time will affect your performance in school? 41% said it won't affect it at all. How do you think changing the time will affect your choice to participate in after-school activities, band, sports, clubs, etc.? 63% said it would negatively impact them in participating after school. Would you vote to change the time? 72% of our students said no. In fact, here's some of their comments. Please don't change this. I have to work and I have responsibilities to take care of. I already get home late due to sports, and changing the time will have me home later. Don't fix something that's not broken. Also, the money used for this time change should be used in some other project instead, which would make the approval rating of our school and district go up. The proposed for high school students, this change is not feasible with after-school practices for sports, tutorials, or clubs. The student athlete or high school employee would suffer the most. Due to the socioeconomic classes at Lee High School, many students have to help support their families with their income. On the athletic side of this, that means not leaving the school until very late, especially if you are varsity. Even underclassmen teams spend hours at school. The best, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Our next speaker is Leslie Cushman.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to express my view against a later start time as an employee, a parent, and a taxpayer of Goose Creek. As a parent of a freshman and a senior, we love the current start time. It gives us family time to enjoy dinner, and then they can do their homework, and they even get to participate in soccer and band. If the start time is later, we won't see them till close to 8 p.m. And if they do decide to get an after-school job, who knows what time we'll see them. Okay. Other parents also rely on their high schoolers to pick up and watch younger siblings. As a district employee, my students like our start time for the above reasons. And as far as getting more sleep, the students have told me that they would just go to bed later. Plus, I feel, and so do the students, that the discipline of getting up early is a good work ethic for their future jobs. Finally, I adamantly oppose an earlier start time as a taxpayer. Goose Creek already has debt. Why incur an additional $5 to $7 million, especially since the system isn't broken? Please don't waste my tax dollars on whimsy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cushman. Our next speaker is Yin Rao.
Good evening. My name is Yin Rabe. I'm the Houston area chapter leader of the national organization Start School Later. We are a coalition of health professionals, sleep scientists, educators, parents, students, and other concerned citizens dedicated to increasing public awareness about the relationship between sleep and school hours and to ensuring school start times compatible with health, safety, education, and equity. High schools in Goose Creek Consolidated ISD have not always started at 7:15. At all of the 3 open forums, the school start time committee stated that school started at one time at 8 a.m. When schools change to an early start time of 7:15, there are unintended consequences. Just a few consequences are increased chance of automobile crashes, increased chance of sports injuries, increased depression, increased suicidal ideation, increased substance abuse, increased risk-taking, increased school violence, increased insulin resistance, increased stress response, increased inflammatory response, increased risk of obesity, increased risk of diabetes, increased risk of heart disease, increased risk of aggressive forms of cancer, reduced immune functioning, reduced attention, reduced problem solving, and reduced academic performance. To delay a start time delay a later start time for an additional year is to continue to do harm. Who are most affected by the early start time? Students from low socioeconomic status. Children from low socioeconomic status families have been found to have poor sleep, characterized by shorter duration, poor quality, greater variability, and greater incidence of clinical sleep disorders. Thus, the later school can start, the greater the opportunity for these students to get the adequate sleep they need. Among findings from a study published at the American Psychological Association is that social class moderated the link between children's sleep and cognitive functioning on standardized ability tests. Children of middle and lower class had similar performance when sleep was optimal. But when sleep was poor, lower socioeconomic status children's cognitive performance suffered. The implication for starting school at 7:15 a.m. means students will just have to go to sleep early to get the adequate amount of sleep they need. In order for students to go to sleep early, sports and extracurricular activities will have to end by 5:30. For children to go home, have dinner, do their homework, to be in bed by 8 p.m. because they have to get up at 5 a.m. to get ready to catch the bus. To be in bed by 8 p.m. and get up at 5 or 6 a.m. gives students the 9 to 10 hours of sleep they need to grow. This is not happening for 90% of students when school starts that early. Band practice and sports events end late. Students are working until 11 p.m. up to 3 a.m. in the morning. Students are not sleeping earlier to get the sleep they need. The rationale of an early bedtime for teens is not working, so we must adjust the start time to protect our students' health and optimize their academics and safety. This is the goal of starting school later. We commend the School Start Time Committee for informing the public at the open forums with information about teen sleep and the benefits of starting school later. On the other hand, when the committee presented their PowerPoint here to the school board last month about concerns from audience members at the open forum, the committee did not address the myths and misconceptions of starting school later brought up by the members of the audience. Tonight, I am speaking for those students who could not be here because of work, Bible study, homework, and extracurricular activities. And it takes courage to speak up, and perhaps they don't have it yet. They count on our leaders to be courageous, to look at the data and research, to make the decision that is best for students' health, academics, and safety. It's not a popular decision, but it's the right decision to start school later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rowley. Our next speaker tonight is Mr. Kyle Hopper.
So I am Kyle Hopper. I work at Goose Creek Memorial High School. I'm a product of this district. I went to Highlands Elementary, Highlands Junior High, Sterling High School. I taught at Robert E. Lee High School for 7 years, and I'm at my 10th year at Goose Creek Memorial. I thought this section was for community involvement. The last speaker is not part of our community. She doesn't live in our community. She doesn't work in our community. She has no one in our community in our schools. I went to all of the town hall meetings. I spoke at 2. I was at the 3rd to support my fellow faculty and my students that showed up that said they wanted to be there. And none of our faculty spoke for it. None of our students spoke for it. On the presentation that was given, there were 3 that spoke for it and 21 against. One of which was the lady that spoke before me, and another one was a student that she brought that did not go to our school. I don't think it's fair to try to stack the deck against us. As school board members, and I live here in Baytown, the people don't want this change. Our faculty at GCM, 86% said they didn't want to change, and 78% of those said that they would be looking for employment elsewhere, and I'm on that list. And I love Goose Creek. I've spent my whole life here. I love my children in my classes. I want to be here for them. But with the added financial burden that would be given to me personally, because I have 2 children that are in the elementary school that I'll have to pay, and it's a minimum of $30 per child per week, I will be taking a huge pay cut in a number of years where our pay has not increased and other districts have come up to where it makes it financially feasible to look elsewhere. And that's not what I want to do, but I feel like if the school time changes, it's going to put me up against the wall and put me out of here. At the last school board meeting, there were concerns from board members about having high school students standing out for the bus stop at 6 a.m. And there were concerns about them driving sleepy. The concern about driving sleepy, it's a 15-minute commute from anywhere to any school in our area. And as far as I know, I haven't heard of any concerns about high school students standing at the bus stop having trouble before school. What is a bigger concern to me are high school students who get home an hour and a half after their younger siblings who get home. Which is safer, a high school kid standing at the bus stop or an elementary school kid coming home with no one there for an hour and a half before their older brothers and sisters get there. And another concern about getting out at 4:30, which is the latest option, we have our most inexperienced drivers being let out of school at the most hazardous time to drive. That's way more dangerous to me than driving at 6 a.m. when there's not very many people on the road. One of the board core values is that it's service before self.
You have 1 minute.
And, I don't want this to be an experiment to put another feather in the hat for research for educational purposes. We should not take a chance on our children's safety and well-being and keeping good teachers as some kind of experiment that bolsters our own agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. That concludes the people who have signed up to speak at citizens' participation. We will now move to agenda item 6, discussion item, superintendent reports. Mr. O'Brien.
This evening we have PASA coming to present a demographic update for Goose Creek CISD. Each board member, you should have a binder in front of you. You can reference to as they go through it quickly. Welcome back. Y'all are here about every 5 years, I think.
Yeah, 2013, I think, was the last time we were here.
Thank you for having us back. My name is Justin Solhavy, and this is Dr. Stacy Tapera. I wanted to just begin with a little introduction. We were hired to basically come up with 10-year enrollment projections for the district. You guys have been experiencing quite a bit of growth, commercial growth, residential growth. We've experienced a lot of oddities lately, of course, with Hurricane Harvey. We'll go into those in a little bit. But I did want to kind of explain what we do here. We actually look forward more than relying on past trends to project student enrollment. So we don't rely on what's happened already. We actually research what's happening into the future. And then also along with that, we take a conservative approach to projecting growth. We know sometimes a developer may tell us we're projecting 1,000 homes, and we know from our experience with that developer or others similarly that that will not happen, or it will just happen at a more reduced rate. So just know that kind of going in as we talk about a lot of these housing trends and growth trends. So starting off, I wanted to just kind of review some of the basic demographics and trends happening in the Houston metro area. We have some maps here showing your PEIMS enrollment data for each school district in the state. Now this is from last fall. We don't have the official fall 2017 information yet. So this is a one-year change, and this is going to be drastically different for next year, or for this year, because of Hurricane Harvey. So I kind of want to skim over these and get to the 5-year projections. But we did have growth from fall 2015 to fall 2016 in Goose Creek. It was about 0.75%. And then that was about 178 additional students. But looking at the 5-year trends from fall 2011 to fall 2016, this is where it really paints a better picture. And I think you can get a good feeling for where the growth is. In Metro Houston, the growth continues to be outside of Beltway 8, around the Grand Parkway corridor, where you have ample land, potential development, and within a distance of a lot of the employment centers. So developers are going to take the least restrictive approach to developing. They want to build where land's available, it's cheaper, and they want to be close to where people work. You guys are in that realm. I want to say 10, 15 years ago, you weren't in that realm as much as you are today. The growth of the city has expanded, and you guys being a little farther out, you're now in that hot zone. Plus a lot of the industrial development happening here. So when you look at that 5-year enrollment change, that's about 2,251 students added from 2011 to 2016. Now, looking back about 10 years, the growth rate during the financial recession was actually pretty steady. It was about 1.5% from about 2008 to 2012. And it really shot up in about 2013 when you started having a lot of industrial growth in this region. We had growth rates between 2.5% to 3%, and that's really slowed down a bit now. And then, of course, this year we actually took a drop. And the enrollments we used to produce this report were from the earlier part of October, so that growth rate may have changed a little bit in the last, from the beginning of October to the snapshot date. But one important thing here when we look at growth in the early grades is our birth rates. And I know this data is not readily available, but we've put it here, and we've actually taken this data from the state of Texas Health Department, and we've aged the births forward 5 years. So when you look on this chart here, you'll actually see the red line is the births, but it's moved forward 5 years. So where we are at 2017, these births actually occurred in 2011, let's say, or 2012, depending on the month. So you can see here that we've been dropping quite a bit, and that follows a trend in the state level as well. Back in 2009, births started dropping. We saw an 8% drop in births statewide. And now this is happening every year, too, so it's not just like it happened one time. We've got 2 to 4 years of a decline in births, and we have to work that out of the system. And Goose Creek followed that trend. So this kindergarten blue line is the kindergarten enrollment, the actual kindergarten enrollment. And you can see here that it followed this birth decline. It correlated pretty well. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we know that there have been more births in this district. We can expect there to be more kindergarten students as we move forward. And I wanted to pull this map out here real quick, because one thing we do is we look at charter school and private school enrollment. So who's not attending your schools? Goose Creek is very, very unique in terms of charter school enrollment. Only 73 students are enrolled in charter schools, and they live in this district. And this comes from the TEA PEIMS data as well. This is about 1 year old. there just aren't many charter schools in these eastern suburbs. Most of those 73 are in virtual campuses, and they can be pulled from anywhere in the state of Texas. And so the percent of charter school students from fall 2016 is 0.3%. And as you can see, no other district except Friendswood even comes close to that in the Houston metro area. So about 97.2% of the resident students who live in this district attend Goose Creek schools. That's very high. On average, we see about 93%, 94%. So we have fewer than 1%, or about 1.6%, sorry, attending private schools that we know about. We've actually contacted all the private schools and gotten estimates of where their students come from. As I said earlier, 0.3% in charters, and the state data also tells us that about 200 students come from other districts, or go to other districts, neighboring districts, that is. Some socioeconomic demographic characteristics that we look at also are things like median age and quality of life factors. And the median age of Goose Creek CISD is actually quite lower than Houston Metro at about 30 years, 30.7 years. And also to point out on this, another interesting stat, the mean travel time to work is 25.7 minutes. Quite a bit lower than most any other school district, except for very urban districts. So that tells me that people can get to work fairly quickly, they live closer to where they work. A lot of times developers like seeing numbers below 30. Now, employment tends to be one of the leading indicators of where new homes will be constructed. Where can we expect to see new residents? The more people are employed in an area, the greater demand for housing. Now, in the city of Baytown, since August 2016, we've actually seen employment tick up, but we've seen the unemployment rate increase. So the unemployment rate went from 9.5% in August 2016 to 11% this past August. And a lot of that has to do with what sector people work in this district. This pie graph breaks down the workforce by employment sector. One of the largest sectors is construction, and that is rare. Most districts don't come close to 10%. In this district, it's 20%, and we know that two very large construction projects, the Chevron and the ExxonMobil crackers, have been either completed or just wrapping up right about now. So this loss in construction jobs, we know they don't all live here. Many live in other districts, many live in other counties, but a good percentage do live here. We don't know exactly how many who were working at any given point in time, but we know that some did, so we know some of the loss that we saw this school year can be attributed to this large sector of construction. Now, we know construction activity is slowing. We know these crackers are in their final stages of construction or wrapping up. We also know that there's more growth coming. We have manufacturing and distribution centers being announced. Sometimes it seems like weekly. We know IKEA signed a lease for 1 million square feet. Some of these companies who have distribution and fulfillment centers in this region, the average employee per square foot is about 155 employees per 1 million square feet. So every time you hear one of these distribution centers coming into the area, know that on average about 150 employees come into work here. They may not be as high-paying jobs as, say, a steel plant, General Steel down there, but they do require a workforce, and this is a growing industry in this region. We know that Lyondell-Basel is expanding in the Channelview area, so that's a $2.4 billion plant. Some of those construction workers will just kind of move right down the freeway that were in these other large plants in Baytown. There is the JSW Steel expansion. They're seeking incentives from the state. They're hoping to possibly expand their facility. It would add about 500 jobs in the Baytown area. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it is a possibility. And know that there are more of these distribution centers coming online. The Port 10 development around Thompson, south of I-10 at Thompson, announced recently, Pontike's development, that they would build 3 million square feet of mostly distribution logistics. In the Texas economy as a whole, the oil and gas recovery has been kind of sluggish, but it's picking up. Oil's kind of rebounded a little bit in the last 12 months. The hurricanes really had a minimal impact on business. We know that the new Chevron facility was impacted, but they're planning on, as far as I'm hearing, coming online early in the first quarter of next year. Now, I wanted to kind of touch on this distribution warehousing space that I talked about a second ago. It's something that I think we don't realize how many jobs it can generate when you start kind of adding these things up. But this bar graph we put together, the gray lines, the gray bars here show the distribution space, or I'm sorry, the percent of retail sales that are online. So e-commerce sales, and this is from the U.S. Census, Labor Department. So just in 2010, only 4.4% of retail sales were online, and that was kind of slowly ticking up. But by 2014, those started going up by 1% annually. We're now at almost 9% of retail sales are online e-commerce sales. That red line there shows the absorption of distribution space. So that can be a distribution center, a fulfillment center, for instance, an Amazon or IKEA fulfillment center. And that's just for the Southeast Houston subsector. So Baytown, think Baytown, LaPorte, Mont Belvieu, maybe outside the Beltway. That line correlates with this growth in e-commerce. So the net absorption of distribution space is increasing because we have an e-commerce demand. And this area is situated perfectly with a lot of roadways. You know, the Grand Parkway is one of them that's going to even help facilitate growth. But the port is right here where we receive goods. And so I do believe this will continue. Of course, all of this demand and the economic growth kind of induces housing growth, right? So what we do is we split the district up into planning units. And you'll see these throughout this big report in almost every chapter and every section. We project students by these planning units. So all the growth projections and student projections are tallied by these geographic regions. And they are split up based on attendance zones and major roads and things like that. We look at local regulations. What the city of Baytown does greatly affects, how they regulate greatly affects growth. So almost this district is basically completely governed by the city of Baytown, either in their city limits or ETJ, just a little bit in Beach City. But for the most part, we're talking about city of Baytown. And with Hurricane Harvey on our minds, we look at natural hazards. We look at it no matter what, but I think it's more important to look at it today more than ever. So we see these shaded areas here as floodplains. The dark areas are floodways. We actually know the county recently bought out 14 homes right here in the district in the far northwest. I believe they're even being demolished currently. I'm not sure if it's those homes or some nearby, but we know they're going to continue pursuing some buyouts, but likely not many in this area. It'll be those deep in the floodplain. We do know, though, that Harris County, which is everything west of Cedar Bayou here, the majority of the district, just last Tuesday passed some of the most strict floodplain regulations in the country. So our report was really prepared prior to that, us knowing they would do that. But for the most part, where a lot of the growth is, it's not in some of the floodplains where we're expecting a lot of it. But it's something to kind of remember. We've already projected minimal growth in some of these floodplains. But if you're in the 500-year floodplain now, you are going to have to mitigate like you used to for the 100-year floodplain. You have to raise elevations of your, raise house elevations up. If you're in that 100-year floodplain, we now know that the Harris County engineers want you to actually not use fill dirt to elevate your home. So we don't know exactly how this will change the minds of builders just yet. If you're deep in the floodplains, it will. But you guys do still have a lot of land left available that's not in floodplains. So I would suspect builders are going to start, and developers will kind of hone into those high ground areas now more than ever. So we also look at infrastructure improvements. One of the biggest coming to this region is the Grand Parkway, which will basically connect Interstate 10 to US 59, the northeast quadrant. TxDOT is saying that by 2022 we could see one lane in each direction. The East Sam Houston Parkway is actually, the widening has started in Pasadena. So that's another big influence in this region, you know, getting goods to and from, getting people to and from. That will, the Harris County Toll Road Authority will also be widening the Ship Channel Bridge over the Beltway 8 Bridge as well. We know that railway access is increasing in some of our industrial centers like Cedar Court. And we do know just right here in our backyard, just behind us, we have new arterials going in, such as San Jacinto and Hunt Road. All of these new arterials will allow builders to actually build in areas that formerly didn't have access or not good access. So we also here at PASA look at parcels that are greater than 10 acres. And have they recently sold? Has there been a transaction? And since 2013, a lot of these blue areas, and even since 2012, some of these orange areas, we see large parcels that have sold. Most of these are industrial down here in the Cedar Court. But wherever we have land selling and land transactions, we have to look at that and start projecting and trying to figure out what's going to happen. And we also look at current parcels that are for sale. So everything greater than 5 acres. What's on the market now that could tell us something about what's coming. And some trends. We know that lot inventory started dropping quite a bit about a year and a half ago. There just weren't as many lots available to build on. Your neighborhood started running out of new homes, new lots. Really, right now, there's only one builder north of I-10 in the Castle Rock community. So that alone you started seeing a drop in the number of new homes constructed. But that's picked up since about June of 2017. You have a lot more lots on the ground. We know there's been a multifamily boom, and we see it right now. We see a couple of complexes going up. That's expected to continue for the next several years, and with all the new industry. But we also know that the city recently enacted a policy. It's not necessarily a regulation, but it's a multifamily distancing policy. And what that tells City Council is the City Council now uses that policy to direct zoning decisions for multifamily developments. And it's telling them that a half-mile buffer is needed between multifamily developments. So 2 years ago, you could pretty much rezone any piece of land. And now the City Council is using a little more discretion. They're saying we want multifamily spaced out. We don't want a heavy concentration or a heavy density. So all of these have been factored in, and we've kind of changed our projections based on it. So the most impactful housing developments over the next 10 years, we are projecting one of them, the most impactful, to be north of the I-10 on the west side of Garth Road. A major developer is looking at building about 1,400 single-family homes. This is right now called the Wallaceville Tract. I really don't want to say their name. It's been in some publications on who it is just because they've said they don't want it announced just yet. But you can expect about 1,400 homes. We've projected 790 over the next 10 years. Again, we want to be a little more conservative. That could change as time goes on. Goose Creek Reserve, which is on the former Country Club golf course site. D.R. Horton is really going crazy there right now. And I think that's because they realize they're one of the few builders out here at the moment. So they're going to take advantage for the next couple of years of that. And then there are a couple of parcels along I-10 on the north side, an 82-acre tract we think could turn multifamily very soon. Trinity Oaks down here, I've been told by the city that they've started platting for about 270 lots. That is south of Baytown proper, and that's the Wells Holding Corporation doing that. But really, there's a lot of development everywhere. It's not located in one spot, but the most dense housing will be focused kind of north of I-10 along Garth Road. And I went through that. Now, in terms of multifamily developments, I did mention that we are in a little bit of a boom right now in this area. There is what we're calling right now Kilgore Crossing along Kilgore Parkway. 240 units are planned. And actually, they are planning another 240 units adjacent. Whether that actually happens or not, I'm not sure. We have projected for it. Otera Bay is under construction, and another complex that is actually planned called Alta Baytown, just to the south of us right here. is planned as well for 336 units. So a lot of these are in the late planning stages or either occurring. We know they'll happen. We do even have one age-restricted community that's actually not listed on here, east of Garth Road, kind of east of the mall. So overall, how many houses can we expect? How many housing units? We are projecting 8,100 new housing units over the 10-year period. And that can be anything from a single-family home to an apartment unit. So out of those 8,100, just about 60% of them are projected to be single-family homes. And then about 35% multifamily dwellings. The multifamily dwellings really drop off after about year 6 just because we don't expect that boom to continue forever. I think right now you'll see a lot of multifamily built, but it may or may not. So we're being a little more conservative with that. So this map shows you the hot spots of the housing development, where we're projecting housing. And you can see it's really scattered everywhere in the first 5 years. And a lot of it really up and down Garth Road with some of those multifamily developments, and then even on the east and south sides. And when you look at the 10-year projection, it really kind of blossoms a little more. And you can see that it's really, we have a lot going on in both north and south of I-10. Now, we can say we're projecting housing, but we know that there aren't always the same amount of students who live in every housing development. So this varies dramatically by type of housing. In single family, the district right now is averaging about 0.62 students per home. That's gone down a little bit from some of our previous studies back in the 2000s, where we were seeing upwards of 0.7. And as for multifamily, we're at about 0.37 students per home, per housing unit. That's about on par with a lot of other suburban school districts. Now, I don't want to say that's happening everywhere, though, because it's not. And so when you actually look at new housing development in the last 10 years, those numbers I said, those averages don't match up. So when you look north of I-10 in single-family development, we actually see closer to 1 student per home, 92 per every 100 homes. When you look south of I-10 in single-family homes, in new housing, that number is about 74 per 100. So fewer students in new housing south of I-10. Now, multifamily units, generally across the district, very low. And this is common, not just in Goose Creek, but in other areas. But it is lower than many other suburban districts with new apartments. So we're seeing about 10 students south of I-10 for every 100 multifamily units, and 13 north. So very minimal impact when it comes to multifamily development on student enrollment. Now, this is the same map I showed you earlier, but I wanted to split out some of these numbers here. So this is our 10-year projections, and when you look at areas north of I-10 in our planning units here, you can see that the vast majority of new housing is single family. And remember I said that almost 1 child per house in some of these new housing developments. Now, when you look south of I-10, there's actually quite a bit more housing projected. But you have more multifamily. So those aren't going to be generating as many students. And Dr. Tapera will kind of elaborate on some of this in a second. But I just wanted you to kind of get a feel for, that there actually is quite a bit of development on both sides of the freeway here. In fact, more south of I-10. So in sum, development north of I-10 is really concentrated, at least our projections are really concentrated around the Garth Road corridor. So overall, district-wide, we're seeing growth everywhere, but in one particular area, we're projecting there to be a concentration of growth. So with that, I'm going to let Dr. Tapera take over. Yeah, I'll try to just slide this over.
You've heard a lot of information tonight, and I'm going to try to summarize a little bit and put this into perspective about how you can use this as a school district. So all of this information and other has been rolled into our model for projecting how many students will be enrolled over each year for the next 10 years. You heard at the very beginning about the aging of the student population and how the kindergarten class has gotten smaller and smaller each year for the past 3 or 4 years. Well, that's a small cohort of grades of kids in those grades, kindergarten, first, second, third, over the past few years, that is smaller, and that those kids will age through the grades and be a small cohort, but they will be followed by future classes of kindergartners that we are anticipating will be larger, due in part to the increasing birth rate that Justin showed you earlier. So the aging of the existing student population is an important factor, of course. You heard a lot about new housing construction, so I don't need to repeat all of that. We have studied a lot about Harvey. Obviously, many of our clients in the Houston area were impacted by Harvey, but we really believe that the long-term impacts of Harvey are going to be minimal in this district. There's been some redistribution a little bit, but in general, we feel like the families will be rebuilding and staying put. Regeneration of older homes with younger families. We didn't touch on this, but this is an important factor that we roll into our projections. We look at historical trends over the past few years. Which neighborhoods are graduating kids and those empty nest parents are staying put, and so there are fewer elementary kids moving in, versus which neighborhoods are turning over. Those parents are downsizing or upsizing, moving wherever when their kids graduate, and they're selling to younger families. And so we carry those trends forward. And then finally, economic factors that Justin went into affect greatly our projections for future enrollment. So this is a summary of what we call our moderate growth scenario each year for the next 10 years. Overall, we project about 26,600 students could be enrolled in Goose Creek CISD in 10 years. Now, this represents this. You see an average of about 1 to 1.5% growth annually, starting in a few years. Justin mentioned the lack of really active building homes and neighborhoods right now. We feel like the developers have recognized this area as a good opportunity, and so they are ramping up. And so that list of highest growth housing developments that you saw on the map we feel like are going to kick in here in the next few years. Keep in mind that the last few years of enrollment growth, you have seen much higher growth rates from 2013 to about 2016. You saw 2 and 3 and 3.5% enrollment growth. We feel like that was largely due to the big construction jobs that were present it's no longer a driving factor. We also feel like the lack of those jobs has contributed to the slight loss in enrollment this year. And so that explains why we are projecting this acceleration of enrollment, but a conservative acceleration. This graph shows in black the historical enrollment, and then our three scenarios of growth: low, moderate, and high growth scenarios. So, as I mentioned, the moderate growth scenario takes into account all of these factors that we have discussed today, and this is what we sort of recommend, that these are our projections. However, a lot of things can change in the next 10 years, and so say the Wallaceville tract really, the major developer really gets underway more quickly than anticipated and really goes full force, well then you could be looking more at the high growth scenario. Likewise, across on the east side of Garth Road, across from that, a new MUD has been established, just waiting for the market to drive a new development. So that could come online faster than we anticipate now, because we have no evidence at this point that it is really going to happen anytime soon. There could be more announcements of more large-scale industrial construction jobs that could lend itself toward this high-growth scenario. But likewise, the low-growth scenario is also possible. One important distinction that Justin mentioned earlier that could trend toward the low-growth scenario would be if a charter school decided to come into Baytown. We have seen evidence on the west side of Houston when a charter school comes in. For example, the International Leadership Academy opened a school on the boundary between 3 different school districts, and and they opened with 1,200 students. And so in that case, they pulled from 3 different school districts, largely 2 different school districts, but it still had a huge impact from one year to the next. If that were to happen in the middle of Baytown, if a charter school were to come in and open in the middle of Baytown, it would pull almost entirely from Goose Creek CISD. And so we are watching charter schools carefully across the state because they impact a lot of our clients. So should that happen, then you could certainly be following a low growth scenario. This map is similar to the one you saw earlier with all the reds and blues. The red and orange is high growth, but this represents projected students. So the age-restricted apartment complexes that are for 55 and older are not included here, and all of those other factors in the model have been included. The red hotspots are largely where you saw projected new housing. It's important to note that when we roll all of this together, over the next 10 years, we're projecting about 700 new elementary students north of I-10, but also about 700 new elementary students south of I-10. Likewise, the junior school population is about the same, and slightly more high school growth in the south, and that's based on simply on aging of the current student population. So while these numbers are similar north and south of I-10, it's important to keep in mind that the area north of I-10 is much smaller than the area south of I-10, and the number of schools north of I-10 are fewer, and so there's a more concentrated growth in fewer schools north of I-10. And so to look at that, let's look at the elementary level. The colors are still the same, but I've overlaid the elementary attendance zones over those hot spots of growth. So south of I-10, you can see that yes, those 700 new students that are projected growth are split among about 6 or 7 elementary schools, the orange and red areas, the hot spots of growth. But north of I-10, those 700 students are almost entirely at Benuelos and some at Highlands and Hopper. So while these red areas may look, they are distributed across the district, the impact at the elementary level is heavily projected to be at Benuelos, and that's due to this large master plan community at the Wallaceville tract. So if you are a numbers person and want to see the numbers behind those colors that I just showed you, these are all of the projected resident students projected to live in each of those attendance zones. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the current enrollments at each of those schools, you will notice that these don't match necessarily your enrollments. For example, at Alamo, there are about 55 students transferring into Alamo, so that 679 at Alamo is lower than you know the enrollment to be. But we have to look at resident students because we're demographers, and we project where people will live. And so stretched out over time, we project resident students. We take the transfers into account, as I'll show you in a minute. But it's important to note that, as I mentioned earlier, the growth in Benuelos is projected to exceed the sort of burst capacity that the architects have determined in about the year 2024 or so, based on our moderate growth scenario. Now, just to put your minds at ease, if you prefer to think about the enrollment with and without the transfers moving in, this assumes that all transfer patterns will remain the same over 10 years, that all special programs will remain where they are, that the number of kids moving in and out of each school will remain constant. It's not really a safe assumption, but just for the sake of argument, it doesn't really change it doesn't have a significant change on the year that Benuelos will exceed its capacity. So let's go back to our map and look at the junior school population. Again, you're looking at the same colors as before, but the junior school attendance zones are overlaid. And so you see that, again, the population growth is distributed pretty evenly across the district, that Gentry, Highlands Junior, and Baytown Junior are all projected to grow by 200, 250 students each, and Horace Mann follows with 100 students or so. And this illustrates, again, the numbers behind those colors on the map. The row of black numbers represents the resident students, and then the row of maroon or red numbers is with and without or plus and minus the current transfer population. At the junior school level, the transfers are not very significant, the most being 82 students net transferring out of Horace Mann. So at the high school level, again, we have growth projected in each of the three high school attendance zones. Now, the greatest growth, of course, is projected at Goose Creek Memorial at a growth of 350 students, followed by Robert E. Lee with 250 and Sterling with plus 200. Keep in mind that at the same time that this population growth is projected, this is where these students are projected to live, remember, and Goose Creek has a big population of students not attending these three traditional high schools. And so particularly the Stewart Career Tech expansion is going to have an impact on this. So if you just add up those three growth numbers, roughly, we're talking about ballpark 800 net high school students to be added to the district. At the same time, the Stewart Career Tech program currently has only ninth graders. They have about 75 ninth graders. That program is anticipated to grow, certainly as each grade is added, but also additional students. Each grade is expected to get bigger and bigger, particularly when the phase 2 expansion of the physical capacity brings the capacity up even larger. The district is expecting maybe upwards of 800 students to participate in the Stewart Career Tech program. That means 800 students will be pulled out of these resident populations not attending the three traditional high schools. And so, therefore, the impact on the three traditional high schools will be lessened by the expansion of the Stewart Career Tech program. And that's, again, illustrated here. For the high school grade group, the transfers are significant enough that you should consider the red row of numbers that includes the transfers in and out. And this also illustrates down at the bottom how the Stewart Career Tech is anticipated to grow to up to about 800 students or so over the next 10 years. So with that, we can take any questions. I know you've heard a lot of information tonight. I know it's very overwhelming, but we're happy to answer any questions.
You see, Justin, moderate growth showed about 300 students per year is what I caught out of that, added to the district, but they'll be scattered across the district.
That's right.
So you demonstrated through the red would be the hot spots that we could anticipate those campuses closing out more quickly. Did y'all look at the data of our current capacity at our campuses? The current capacity?
We received
92% at this campus and so forth.
Yes, and that's included in the last chapter of this report. And those capacities are based on the work done by L&N Architects.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Great information and well presented.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to wing it right now since my computer is timed out. We are now at agenda item 7, approval of minutes. I'd like to take A and B into consideration and then have a suggestion for the board. Action item A, the October 30th, 2017 board workshop.
Move for approval.
We have a motion from Mr. Laredo, second from Mr. Pete Poppy to approve the minutes of the October 30, 2017 board workshop as presented. I'm just going to ask, since I don't have it in front of me, were we all present? Mr. Ben Poppy was not here. Okay. All in favor of any discussion of the motion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed, all abstaining. That motion carries 6 in the affirmative with 1 abstention. 7B, the November 13th regular board meeting.
Second.
Motion for Mr. P. Poppy, second for Mr. Laredo to approve the November 13th regular board meeting minutes as presented. Again, I'm going to ask, was there anyone absent? We were all here. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. That motion carries 7-0. Okay. Now, Board, I'd like to make a suggestion at this time. It is now 8:14, and we had a scheduled executive session consultation with an attorney at 8 o'clock. I would like to ask the board, and I'm sorry to all of our presenters, but that's something we need to probably go into executive session for that one item and then come back out and resume our meeting. So at this time, the board is going to recess into closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meeting Act. And that's with the consultation with the attorney, which one's on. 551.071, private consultation with board's attorney on subjects or matters authorized by law. That will be the only thing we will be doing in executive session at this time. We're now adjourned into executive session. No action was taken while the board was in executive session. The time is 8:59. We will now move to action item 8A. Mr. O'Brien.
Item 8A is consideration and approval of an order authorizing the issuance of Goose Creek CISD Unlimited Tax Refunding Bond Series 2017. With us we have Ryan O'Hara and Tom Sage, presenting as bond counsel.
Thank you, Dr. O'Brien. Ryan O'Hara and Tom Sage again. We got good news. We're going to work on a bond sale that's going to save you a lot of money. Got a brief presentation here for you. On page 2 of the presentation, I have copies if you don't have it on your screen, but hopefully you got it on your screen. Page 2 is simply the bond buyer index. This is the national, I kind of refer to this as the Dow Jones for tax-exempt municipal bonds. As you kind of see, this rate comes out every Thursday. So on the 7th, rates keep dropping, moving lower. We're at a 3.29% on the bond buyer index. Gives you an idea of the overall complexion of the tax-exempt bond market. Page 3 is really the crux of what we're working on here tonight. We've got roughly $78 million in bonds for your 2013 and 14 authorization that are at an average interest rate of a 4.93%, and in today's market, including all transaction costs, we're able to get that down to about a 3.1%, and that generates kind of that yellow column there in the middle, the $4.2 million in change. And I was actually talking with Margie before the meeting. Rates are even a little better than what we have in here. So we're closer to $5 million in savings. Again, just taking bonds that are higher interest rate, refinancing to a lower interest rate. We're moving very quickly on this transaction. We actually have everything in place. We're actually going to price the bond issue tomorrow. There are some tax law provisions that we're trying to avoid if they're enacted. So we're going to close this transaction before the end of the year. And realize this savings, pass it on to the taxpayers. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer. If you've got any legal ones, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sage. But we're moving fast. We ask for your approval of the parameter order to allow us to go out and sell the bonds tomorrow on your behalf.
Good evening. My name is Tom Sage, Bond Counsel of the District. A pleasure to see you. Ryan didn't leave a whole lot of chicken on the bone there, so I'll be happy to answer some questions. One thing he did mention, and I did want to compliment Mr. Grimes, who's acted on this very, very quickly. The new tax law legislation that you're seeing on the news every day, one of the things it does is it eliminates the ability to do advanced refundings, which is what we're doing in this transaction. So anything after December 31 is no longer available. And your staff of the district has reacted very, very quickly, very professionally to have us ready in record time to price bonds tomorrow. So it's been a pleasure working on it. Just prepared an order for your consideration. The approval of that order is the only action that this board needs to take. We're looking to price the bonds tomorrow. We'll get signed up and we'll go from there.
I know when I heard it initially, it was about half as much. So
it was a much smaller transaction. Actually, it keeps getting bigger and better, going the right way. So
I appreciate y'all going back and pulling the other series as well.
You bet. So again, I'm hopeful, knock on wood, we're going to be north of $5 million in savings.
that provision both referred to, is that in both versions?
It's in the Senate now, so
It is.
we're all expecting the venture fund agreement.
If it's in both versions, when will that kick in?
January 1st.
So
this
we need
transaction
to
will
move right
close
now.
on the 29th? 29th.
Yeah.
All right, so we're closing very quickly as well.
There's $2.9 billion in bonds out there in the marketplace just in Texas alone. So there's a lot of deals going, but as you saw from that graph, the overall market's pretty good. So we're going to get in and get out.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Pete Poppy, a second from Mr. Ben Poppy to approve the recommendation to authorize issuance of Goose Creek Unlimited Tax Refunding Bond Series 2017. Any questions? All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen,
Thank you.
for saving us some money.
Thanks. We'll get back to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 8B.
8B is consideration of conflict of interest acknowledgement. The administration recommends that you approve.
There's no action. I'm sorry, I just want to read it. Want me to read it?
The acknowledgement.
Yeah. Okay. Conflict of interest acknowledgement does not require board action, but we are being asked to review the district policy regarding the disclosure of conflicts of interest and acknowledge whether a conflict of interest disclosure must be made in connection with the application for value limitation agreement, Covestro. Okay. We will be considering an application for a value limitation agreement with them later this evening. So I'm asking all the board members to initial attached document that I'm going to be passing around to acknowledge form will be entered into the minutes of the meeting that you have no conflict of interest with dealings with Covestro. Just ask for a vote. Mr. Sampson, any conflict of interest with Covestro? Mr. Clem?
No.
Mr.
No.
Ben Poppy? Pete Poppy?
No.
Al Richard, no.
Augustine Rado, no.
Jessica Wood, no.
Okay.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Sampson. Okay. So we will initial that form a little later this evening. We've had voice determination on it. So we may go now to action item 8C.
Which is the consideration of action items relating to retaining attorney's consultant to assist the district in the review and processing of the application for value limitation agreement from Covestro pursuant to Chapter 313 of the Property Tax Code.
And Dawn, please let me see that.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Leon from Powell & Leon.
Sarah, I'll bet you that green light to your left.
There's
Sarah.
a green light on here.
Unless you don't want to close it. Just
And
in
there's
Jennifer,
one
you can.
here.
Jennifer,
This.
you turn it
Oh,
on.
okay.
They're on. Oh.
Okay.
Zach did his magic from the back. Thank you, Zach.
And this is Jennifer Walsh with Covestro. You have on your agenda this evening an application for value limitation, and you have several items associated with that. One is every time you get a new application, we do a new engagement agreement that's unique to each application, so that's on your agenda. And then the second item is going to be whether the board seeks to accept that application. So, with the board's permission, we talk about the whole process, or?
So administration would recommend the acceptance of Sarah Leon as a representation to present this, and then D will be what she'll be presenting on the application itself.
I'll make the motion to accept the attorney as presented, Sarah Leon, Powell Leon.
I'll second the motion.
Motion from Mr. Pete Poppy, second from Ms. Woods to accept the firm of Powell Leon. Leon Powell. Powell Leon. For the Chapter 313 proposal.
Since Powell's not here, we can go Leon.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, now we can do the actual one.
All right. You have this evening an application from Covestro that is essentially an expansion of its existing plant. It's high-performance polymers, which I've learned this evening can be used from anything from paint to makeup to mattress foam. So it's a wide variety of commercial uses. It's a $650 million in new investment in Goose Creek ISD. The total property value at the end of the construction phase is going to be about $580 million. That's the projection. There are going to be 2,000 construction jobs between prior to 2024, mainly in 21 through 23. So I noticed in the earlier presentation you have a lot of construction folks that are out of work right now, so that might be a good boon for your community. At the end of the project's construction, there'll be 25 permanent jobs, minimum of 25 permanent jobs that pay $63,000 or greater. I believe there probably will be more. 25 is the minimum required by the statute. If the project is approved, there would be a $100 million limitation amount, which means that the first $100 million of value would be taxed at the full M&O rate, and anything over the $100 million would be under a value limitation for a 10-year period between 2024 and 2033. And I know the district already has some 313 agreements. What we would do, if the board approves it, would be to enter an agreement with the company where the company would reimburse to the district the full amount of the lost maintenance and operations tax revenue. So the maintenance and operations tax revenue for impact on the district would be a zero. It would be the same as if you had not entered the agreement. But you would have that additional $580 million if it's built for INS purposes to help you service that debt that you just authorized. The company is supposed to go into commercial operations in 2024. At this point, the acceptance of the application is not approving the project. It is simply approving us to submit it to the comptroller for an analysis, and we are also going to provide you with a school finance analysis from the Region 12 Education Service Center school finance team, and they will be able to give you a 15-year projection of how that will impact the school district finances. And after you have that information, you can decide whether or not you want to enter an agreement with Covestro.
Administration recommends the approval of the agreement, as Covestro has proven to be a partner to the school district in many, many different ways, both in their generosity with treasure and talent and time that they commit to the school district through everything from field trips to serving and career days and things of that nature. We had our first astronaut, I believe, here a couple years ago because of Covestro's donation. So we recommend entering into this agreement.
Well, President, I make a motion to accept the an application of value limitation agreement with Covestro.
Second. I have a motion from Mr. Pete Poppy, second Mr. Williams, second from Mr. He beat you just to the buzzer there to approve the application of value limitation agreement for Covestro pursuant to Chapter 313 of the Property Tax Code. Any discussion?
Excuse me. This is the application, right?
Yes. Yes. Just the application.
Okay.
Any other questions? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I'll be back in 2 months.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Mr. Ron.
We'll move along with consent agenda. Consideration consent agenda E1, fiscal year 2016-17 Goose Creek CISD money purchase pension plan and trust audit report. Number 2, donation to Robert E. Lee High School. Number 3, donation from Covestro. Number 4, 2017-2018 Texas Rural Education Association TRE Legal Services Program Agreement with Powell & Leon, LLP. Number 5, Imagine Learning Software Licenses. Number 6, adoption of resolution to enter into interlocal agreement between the Central Texas Purchasing Alliance, CTPA, and the Goose Creek CISD. 7, final option to extend CSP for awards, trophies, plaques, and related items. Number 8, final option to extend CSP for athletic supplies, equipment, sporting goods, and related grocery items. Number 10, second option to extend CSP for maintenance and building supplies. Number 11, develop rezoning maps for high school. Number 12, budget amendments. Administration recommends approval.
Any board members like to have any of the items on the consent agenda pulled for individual consideration?
Pull number 11.
Okay. We pull item 11. Is there any general broad questions for items 1 through 10 or 12 that could be answered at this time?
I just got a quick question. Under the approval of the CSP for each one of these items, is there a line item budget for each one of them, or are we just renewing a contract?
We're renewing the contract so we can conduct business with them. What it means by when it says final option, it means next year we'll have to go out for an RFP and allow everyone else to submit applications to these services. These are the ones that have been selected for the last 3 years.
Move for approval, all consent agenda except for item 11.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Laredo, a second from Mr. Poppy to approve consent agenda items 1 through 10 and number 12. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. None opposed. 7 in the affirmative, 7-0 passes. Okay. Number 11, develop rezoning maps for high school. Mr. Poppy.
I just wanted to ask is this for all options on the table? Is this the 3 traditional and the mega, or what are we, do we need this?
It would be to develop a map for mega and to develop a map for the 3 traditionals. We would have to work it. We would prepare a workshop where we as a board would get together and develop those 2 maps.
And it's following up from our workshop in October. That was the directive.
Okay, so
we're voting on the
what's the timeline on
We're
that?
not voting on a specific map. We're just voting that we are going to develop a map.
We're voting on the exact wording on page 119. That sounded like
Yes,
a statement.
I believe so. I'm going to go to 119.
And the only reason I'm asking is, I know we have a committee meeting doing a facility condition assessment. They're looking at some projects, looking at a potential bond in the future, possibly. We're looking at either a mega high school, which would affect that facility condition, or we're looking at traditional. My opinion is if we can knock one of these off the thing now, that would save our people a lot of work and be able to meet your timelines for this potential bond if it comes to play. I'm just thinking out loud.
Are you proposing to only develop maps for one of the 2 this evening?
I thought this.
I don't know if I can do that with the way the verbiage is written.
Which says that it's to approve the development for those 2 configurations at this time. Yes.
I thought this was a motion in response to what happened at the last meeting. To develop 3 specific maps. In that case, if somebody makes a motion, he doesn't even second, he gets killed. Correct?
That's good.
So I'll make the motion that we approve this.
What are we approving?
This motion.
If
there's no second, the motion gets killed.
This being what's presented.
Okay. We have a motion from Ms. Laredo and a second from Ms. Woods that we approve the development of rezoning maps for high school configurations options as in the rationale 3 equal-sized high schools or 1 consolidated high school. Any discussion? Excuse me. Sorry, Zach. Having no discussion, call for a vote. All in favor of developing the rezoning maps for the high school, 3 equal high schools and 1 consolidated at this time, please raise your right hand. Was that a hand up or not, Mr. Smith?
I was going to ask a question, but you
Oh, did I say no? Did I ask for no discussion?
Yeah, I missed it.
Okay.
It went by me.
Okay. All right. Again, all in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed? Okay. That motion fails. 3 There are 3 types of training. Tier 1 hours, which are part of the Texas Education Code for newly elected or appointed board members. Tier 2 hours are team building, and Team 3 hours are continuing education. I will read all of our accumulated hours into the record. Mr. Richard Clem has 3 Tier 1 hours, 3 Tier 2 hours, and 12.75 Tier 3 hours for a total of 18.75 hours. Mr. Ben Poppy has 3 Tier 1 hours, 3 Tier 2 hours, and 13.5 Tier 3 hours for a total of 19.5 total. Mr. Augustin Laredo III, 2 hours of Tier 1, 3 hours of Tier 2, and 8.25 hours of Tier 3 for a total of 12.25. Mr. P. Poppy has 2 hours of Tier 1, 3 hours of Tier 2, and 23.25 hours of Tier 3 for a total of 28.25. Congratulations for being an overachiever. Al Richard has
medal? Do I get a medal?
2 hours of Tier 1 training, 3 hours of Tier 2 training, and 14.25 hours of Tier 3 training for a total of 19.25 hours. Mr. Howard Sampson has 2 hours of Tier 1 training, 3 hours of Tier 2 training, and 2 hours of Tier 3 training for a total of 7 hours of training. Ms. Jessica Woods has 2 hours of Tier 1, 3 hours of Tier 2, and 12 hours of Tier 3 for a total of 17 hours of board training for this fiscal year. That takes care of G. F. No, I'm sorry, F. Now we'll move on to G. Item G. Okay. Mr. White.
Item G says school start times as recommended by administration. As you received the presentation at the last board meeting, administration recommended postponing that decision, allowing more research to be done and potentially for it to be a grassroots effort, where that potentially the very people that are objecting to that would be the ones presenting on its behalf. The reason for postponement was for further investigation and deliberation.
Seek a motion. Seek a motion.
I'm not sure I understand what we're being asked to approve.
You're being asked to approve the recommendation that was made at the presentation at the last minute that we postpone any decision on this for 1 year and have further study.
Thank you.
Seeking a motion. Hearing no motion, the recommendation is denied. Okay. On the topic of school start times, okay, since we have just postponed, failed to move postponing of it, it means that this board wants to continue on in its determination of school start times for the next school year. I am asking the board to consider to narrow down the 3 choices that were brought before the public forum so that we can narrow our choices down as we try to reach a decision on this topic. So in your packet, you have the options that went before the public forum, and they are numbered 5, 6, and 7. Yes, option 5, 6, and 7. Those were the 3 options that were brought before the public forums and have been in addition to option 1, which was no change. Okay? I am asking, can this board reach some majority consent tonight to narrow these 3 down to just 1, where we only have 2 options on the table as we move forward in this?
Do we have cost estimates for these options?
Well, we had the cost estimates when it was first reported to us, but
Isn't that the final page?
yeah, we looked.
I think the final page.
Yes, the final page is a side-by-side comparison. It shows the needed routes, the annual budget impact of each. The annual budget impact of each is in green, I believe. No, no, this one. That just started. Yeah. The one that went to the public, 5, 6, and 7, the fourth page has the numbers in green, the annual budget impact of each.
So the one that's at 2.4 million, or 2.3 million, 1.8 million, or 1.35 million.
That's the three that were brought to the public.
Not
yes.
the 5 to 7 million we heard earlier. Cost.
Oh.
I just want to clarify that we're not looking at $5 to $7 million.
So, at this point, it's just a discussion. Does the board want to try to get something narrowed down?
Can I ask what this is?
That would come after this.
Okay.
It may not even come into play tonight. Well, it could come into play after we decide if we want to do something with these three options at this time.
Okay, so you're looking for
Well,
these options?
my rationale is we're not going to get this thing to a vote until we get it down to two options. 1 versus 2, or 1 versus 5, 1 versus 6, 1 versus 7, 1 versus whatever. I just don't see how we can make a motion to move on any of them until the board decides which one they feel is the best viable option. Or does the board want to vote on each one individually? And keep it or throw it out. If you remember earlier, we threw out 2, 3, and 4 as not being feasible for us. Therefore, we don't have those papers in front of us anymore. So we're down to 1, 5, 7, and 8. 1, 5, 6, 7 from the board, the public forums.
Well, after hearing from the public, I think going from 7, 15, and 9 was too big of a jump. Although I fully support the 9, I think it was just too big of a jump. I got you. So I'd like, option 5 has high school starting at 8:15. It's still an hour later, but still 45 minutes earlier than the 9 o'clock that was originally proposed. Doesn't put the getting out at 3:45 as opposed to 4:30, which I think is a concern about the potential of the job. So that is, I like these options, but I think there's so much more on the table that we could put on to get more options. I believe we could have, do we want to discuss that, or are we just looking at 5, 6, and 7?
Well, I guess we could move to the next packet. One of the things that was asked for at a board meeting a few weeks back after the public forum was to see more options brought forward by administration. So administration has put together for us, and that's the other packet, more options to consider. Before we look at these options, I want you to know, though, that there were some caveats with these new options. The new options would require us to have an extended school year because the minutes in these options do not meet the state minimum of minutes. Unless we would do something as a board, we would not be able to put these new options into play at all under our current calendar. Because you will see that the new ones proposed are 7-hour school days. We're currently running 7-hour and 15-minute school days, which we need 7:15 and the number of days that we are in school to reach the state minimum of minutes required.
How many extra days would that be?
6 1/4.
So it's a week, basically.
About a week and a week plus a day and a quarter. To do if we went to a 7-hour school day. And that's the next proposals you can see. So if
that would require us in a future board meeting revisiting the District of Innovation with potentially that one item on there of starting the school year earlier than the 4th Monday
of August. We would probably have to start the 3rd Monday of August to get these bell schedules to work.
Our teachers would work the same amount of days?
That would be in my proposal, same amount of days.
That's a requirement by the state. They have to work 187 days. And our instructional days right now is 7.5 hours, so we're losing 30 minutes every day. So that would
front load it and then balance your schedule and balance your semester.
Absolutely.
You could front load it and balance your
Do it without a DOI.
But the teachers would have work. My question is, I know that we look at it by minutes. Would the teachers have to work what they would consider extra days?
No, because by law they already work 187 days, so that wouldn't change.
And if I'm correct, this year, didn't the teachers come back and work 9 days before the students came this year?
Correct.
9 days? And then throughout the school year, we
held,
throughout the school year, we have built-in staff development days also for them to work to get to their 187 contractor days.
So the new option B doesn't look like everybody. So it's basically it's elementary A 7:30 to 2:30, elementary B 8 to 3, high school 8:30 to 3:30, junior high or junior school 9:15 to 4:15.
Yeah,
at a cost of $910,000 a year to the budget, with a one-time purchase of $229 for buses. And then we do have flexibility if we need it. You said we're at 7.5 now, it's going down to 7. Is that correct? So that would be 30 minutes. So we could have to look at going to 7:15 to get us back to the 6 1/4 days. But we went to 12.5 when you said this. We were at 7.5 already. Right. So you doubled it. So if we went to 7:15, it puts us back at 6 1/4. Which is 5 days a week, 3 weeks.
Just to kind of keep in mind that impacts your periods.
Yep.
So when we look at high school and dual credit, or we offer advisory for tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, that may have to pull those out so that you're not losing the instructional time within the content areas.
Yeah. And if I recall right, the committee that went and visited the other 2 schools, both of those did their interventions before or after school. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
They didn't build it into their school days.
And the only other thing I wanted to bring up, just to bring it up, it hasn't been really brought up before, but it would alleviate 95% of all the concerns from all the town hall meetings that we're at. Maybe 94%. But if we went, you kept it as what, the 9 to 4 or 9 to 4:30, but if you offered a 0 period, a flex period, for those students that are concerned about staying after school and having a job, they could take this class starting at 8 o'clock or 8:10, which is still an hour, almost an hour later start than they currently have now, and they would be done at the end of 7th period, which is within 15 minutes of about where they get out of school, time they get out of school now. So that wouldn't affect their job. You could have those teachers, those classes that may, could actually teach period 0 through 7. That's 8 periods. They have 10 to teach now. The other students can go 1 to 8 and get their 8 period. And you could, I think with being a little creative and being flexible, you could still have almost a 9 to 4 we talked about, but you're still giving those students who have special needs with a job, or they have whatever need that they have, they can go that 0 period, that flex period. Just not one to throw out there.
They did not provide transportation. So
They did not provide transportation to that flex period, the flex period. And then you could have the other side of the coin is, you could have students take 9 classes. So they can go 0 period if they wanted to and go all, if they were just gung-ho about their academic, they love their coursework. But like I said, it's going to be a small percent, but I think that does alleviate or help alleviate. Because if you have a job, if you wanted to get out early to have a job, you probably have transportation. So you could go 0 period. And just want to throw that out there. I don't know if it's going to stick. I don't know if anybody, it's a big issue. But
you mentioned 7:15 though, to add the 15 minutes back. I didn't have an issue with the elementary starting at 7:15. I would. And all of these have elementary starting at 7:30.
I would just add 15 minutes every day. I'm sorry. Add 15 minutes every day. That's what I was thinking. Just thinking out loud.
In other words, looking at option 2, or Which one, option 2 or 3? Which one?
I've been looking at 4B, but I think it'd be the same whether option.
I don't have a 4B, I'm sorry.
You don't have the right one.
The original ones are the ones that we just got tonight. Just got tonight. Okay, I've got option 1, 2, and 3 on mine.
I've got 4 on the bottom.
Oh, there's a comparison that puts all of the old ones with the new ones. I don't have that.
And this one.
That's good.
That might have been sent to us.
There's one sent to us that has that. Does everybody have this one?
What's the date on it?
March 12th.
They all start on March 20th. They all say March 20th. Cover sheets all say March 20th.
You're the only one that got that one.
Printed out everything in the last week of email.
Oh, you printed that out, okay.
It was emailed to us.
Maybe it's this one.
Maybe.
It's the one that came in our email, it's not this one that's printed. And,
I printed out everything.
yeah, well, what you printed out is not what was in our folder here today.
No, it wasn't.
Nobody can tell us what we're trying to do. I asked that question last time. We discussed it.
No, okay, I want to get back to Mr. Poppy's. You called it 4A? Is that what you called it? Okay, and well, I think 4A is actually option 4 right here, isn't it?
That one we already voted down.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, and that one, that got voted down, so now we're just having a discussion. I asked the board if we could take some action to whittle some of the options down, because we have so many options in front of us. We'll never come to, we have too many options in front of us.
What's the...
Consideration of school start time. I think that's all we're doing is talking about school start
times is recommended by administration. So we no action on it, but we can act in to give them direction to something new, different start times. Yeah.
No, we're not. We're not. That's not.
We're giving them direction on.
We need to give the administration direction of what we want them to bring back to us.
Give or take.
Mr. Richard, the option B is option 3 that in the new packet.
The new one? I'm going to get on the new one, so we're all
okay, now the option 3.
Option B, the one that Mr. Pop is talking about, is the option 3 that we were sent in this new packet.
Okay. That says as of 12/4.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll use that one, so then we'll pick the same one.
Okay.
That's...
So you were not suggesting that we change this 7:30 to 7:15?
No. Okay. I said 7:15 is in 7 hours and 15 minute day.
I misunderstood when you said 7:15. I thought you meant time of day.
No, gotcha.
You were saying if we put the 15 minutes back in this, so that we only have to add 6 1/4 days to our school year, we would just add 15 minutes at the end of each of these 4 numbers, is what you were saying.
So one of the things that you mentioned was in regards to the, I guess, option B is creating a 0 period, and you could potentially have the teachers that, I don't know what the breakdown would be. I know that one of our presenters said that the overwhelming majority of teachers, but that's not necessarily true, because about half of the teachers voted to keep it how it is, and the other half voted for some sort of change, and it was the same for the parents. It's just the change wasn't there. The way I view that is you have, if you would have just asked, do you want change or not, 50% said yes, roughly half said yes, roughly half said no. And it's the same thing with the parent. I think those were little, I know what was done. I just don't think that the people that are presenting understood that. Maybe they did. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of offering the students more options in regards to creating a zero period, and mainly for one reason that I don't think we've really talked about, because it's something that I consider very important, is we have a lot of students that have to take remedial courses, and it doesn't allow them to, it always seems to me that it's frustrating to me that the kids that sometimes need vocational classes, or kids that are trying to explore career paths that maybe aren't given the opportunity, and not just vocational, just any career path, because they're stuck in remedial courses, and this would allow, and those are the students that probably need those kind of courses the most, for several reasons, including to maybe boost their GPA, but also because they have an interest. Using something like option B with an option of what, like Mr. Coffey was talking about, creating a zero period, would allow students that are forced to take remedial courses to have more options in the form of electives or vocational classes. It would also maybe allow teachers that are intent on wanting to leave a little bit earlier to take care of their business to be able to do that, while other teachers, i.e. me, would be able to come up with later start time. I think is that something that we could definitely look into?
We just, again, have to be really careful with contact hours within the CTE to be able to get the weighted ADA. And so as we shorten the day, that impacts some of those areas that we're going to have to be really careful with, because that does impact funding. But yes, absolutely. Because we do that right now for after school for students. So kind of a 0 hour at the end of the day to make sure we're getting those contact hours, especially in PTE.
Seems like a 0 hour at the end of the school would not work for people who have to leave to take care of a sibling, or go to a job, or in extracurriculars. So maybe a 0 hour at the beginning of the day would solve that issue.
Does anybody remember the 0 hour from 20 odd years ago that
I do.
basically was a fiasco?
It's all in how you do it. A 0 hour is no different than the first period. Just say you have a 9 period day now.
The same question I asked last time we discussed school start times. Why are we doing this? What is our objective? What is our goal? What is the why? Are we trying to improve test scores? Are we trying to improve student health? Are we changing because we want to change something? Why are we doing this? What is our goal?
You want our goal, or you asking us individually?
I don't feel like the board has a goal.
Well, the goal is to do what's best for our students.
In what respect?
Well, hopefully all respects.
Because if it's,
so one of those is a later
if we're listening to the research that kids need to sleep more, and then we start school with a 0 hour, we've extended the school day. We haven't shortened it. We haven't allowed them to sleep more.
We just gave them 45 more minutes.
Not if they take your 0 hour.
Starts at 8 o'clock. Starts at 8 a.m.
But they're still going to stay at school forever, and they're going to have one more class of homework. They're not going to sleep more.
Well, you're assuming they're going to take 9. They're going to be done for 7th period. It's still 8 periods a day.
My voice of experience says to kids that you want to rest more than to take 9 classes.
And that's fine.
Then have we negated the purpose of doing it?
No, because the purpose of doing it is, one, sleep. Help them get more sleep. They're getting 45 minutes more sleep. Okay, check that. We've accomplished that goal. Number 2, the studies will show, and I sent some Deer Park data, the year we changed, our test scores went up the next year. I mean, it's not causal. It's correlational at best, but it's data. You got it. We visited other districts.
Where's that data?
I sent it to the board president, and I didn't send it to the whole board.
I'd like to see that. I can't find it.
It's just a PowerPoint slide. I'll send it to you. We're trying to do it, better students from that aspect. You're giving the students more flexibility. Now, for those students that have jobs, they can go to 0, start at 8 o'clock. They get 45 minutes more rest, and nothing really changes in their day. And they're still babysit in the afternoon. They can go to their job. We've met that issue. I mean, what more? I mean, I think it's a very good compromise of all the concerns. Because I do think 7, 15, and 9 is probably too big of a jump, even though I fully support that. In talking with qualitative data, talking to those districts that we went up to, talking to the principal, that was the principal in the district I work at when the change was made, when we made it 9 years ago, completely changed the atmosphere and environment of that campus, night and day. The kids were awake at first period. They weren't dragging in half asleep. I mean, I know we've had people complain and
to the town hall and I was there, none of them have ever experienced it. They just said, no, my life is going to change because they, in their minds, think nothing else, no other variable in their day is going to change. Well, we're coming up with a compromise to help with that. And if tutorials are done after school, well, now maybe tutorials are done at 8:15 or 8 o'clock to 8:45. Still 45 minutes more sleep, still not staying after later. I mean, it's just not, everybody thinks your day is in concrete, and it's not in concrete. It's like daylight savings time. Sun comes up, sun goes down, same amount of time between the two, no matter what time your clock's at.
Well, and one of the things that you can do to resolve that, and Mr. Clem, if we want to bring back the past, one of the things that we used to do in the past is going at 8, or pretty much at 8, and we did away with that. And I have a feeling that we did away with it because of economics within the district, not anything to help kids. It wasn't so that kids could get up earlier, it's because so we could save a couple of bucks. But in regards to finding interventions, one of the things that I've seen, I'll tell you, at our school we went to it this year, is something called flex lunch, where the kids get an hour, and that's where you do your tutoring. That's where you do your interventions. That's where your kids go to lunch. And teachers, for example, I got some duty, and I got some tutorials, but I get a true 30-minute lunch instead of a 25-minute lunch where I'm running around under a traditional schedule. And those are options that I think our district could maybe look at as well, is looking at situations where our lunch periods are changed. And so to allow those interventions within the school district, within the school day, so that our kids are getting the full capacity of that day. I mean, you make the argument, well, kids aren't going to go to school. Well, kids, the parents that are arguing that their kids are going to go to sleep earlier are also the parents that are arguing, take the phone away, make them responsible. It's both. They're contradicting themselves. I want what's best for our kids as well. I mean, my kids, they're like, well, I really don't want to change. But then I ask them why, and then they can't give a good reason. It's because I think students don't do well to change unless they see some immediate reaction to it. And I think you have to give them time. It's kind of like the argument with the earrings, saying that, we don't want to do earrings because what happens when they get ready for the real world? Well, if you go to a lot of those kids, when they go to the real jobs, they're not wearing earrings because we see it as their job, but they see it as something completely different.
I'd like to address something you said. I disagree that we went to 7:15 for money. We used to start at 8 because we had a 6-period day. And we tried to solve the issue of kids needing more than 24 units to be able to graduate. So we started offering the 0 period before 8 o'clock, where they came in at 7:15. So basically, after 3 years of that, the district then said, well, let's just make everyone go there, and now we have a 7-period day. That's how we went from 6 to 7, and just within the last year or 2 years. This is the first or second year of the 8-period day.
We're on this is our fourth year because this is our first cohort graduating under the foundation plan.
So we went to an 8-period day in the same time frame as the 7-period day by adding 15 minutes. So we went from 6-period day to 7-period day to 8-period day so that the students would have enough units or opportunities to graduate under the new state plans as they increased in Carnegie units. I don't think it had anything to do with we saved money by going to 7:15. It was just to add another period so the kids could graduate.
I see it, and thank you for correcting me, but I see it based on this is basic economics, is what everybody's arguing about.
Well, it's because of the size of our district now. Right. We weren't at 23,000 students being bused. Oh, I'm sorry, not 23,000 being bused, but I think we bust 80% of our students. I know Mr. Walsh, I had a death and he's not here. 16,000 of our 23 are bused. Right. I could say probably in the 80s we were only busted maybe 10,000 kids.
We were also presented with mountains of research that children learn better early in the morning.
Better.
That's what the research said.
Let me ask a question because, everybody's talking about time and stuff, but we seem like we're only talking about one sector, the high school, and where we start them
compared to when the elementary and when the junior high start. So, you know, the concerns that I have for, you know, like some parents talking about, well, I don't have nobody to keep my child when they get out of elementary at 2:30, so now they got to pay for daycare. And if we at a socioeconomic disadvantage in this district, and the ratio of demographics as we have them, is that going to cost the parents more money who have kids who get out early, like at 2:30, and they have to pay for daycare till they get home? That's the little questions I ask myself.
And that was a good question when we were at the committee. When we went to Denton ISD and we went up to Carrollton Farmers Branch.
Right.
I don't remember which district it was, but that question was asked, and it was kind of interesting because the answer we got was not what we expected. The person said, you know what we actually found? Because high school started later, a lot of parents didn't need to get daycare in the morning. So they used to have to get it in the morning and in the afternoon, or just in the morning. But they didn't have to get it in the morning. So it was really a wash. And I was surprised by the answer, because I wasn't expecting it. But no matter what schedule you have, someone's not going to like it.
Well, I know that. I know you got.
We know that. I can tell you, looking at the data, and thank you, Dr. Duarte, for getting the survey results by campus to us. If you look at that data, we have every junior high teacher voted against. They all voted to go. They want an earlier start time.
Yeah.
Someone doesn't want to go to 4 o'clock, and it's the junior highs. And if you look, it was an overwhelming majority of the junior high respondents were go to option 3, which put them at the middle of the pecking order instead of the end of the pecking order. I just found a little humor in that. That no matter what you do, whoever gets that last schedule is going to be upset. So like right now, the junior school teachers are upset with their schedule.
Right.
They don't like it. Well, I live next door to a junior school teacher. He says his kids come into his classroom at 8:40 and they're there until 4:20 because like junior schools do go longer than 7.5, do they not? Don't they go 7:45 this year?
No.
I think you do because of transportation. They added 15 minutes, ma'am.
8:50 to 4:20 is our junior schools. Yeah, it's 7.5. So it's still 7.5.
8:15 to 4:20.
8:50. 8:50.
Well, my next door neighbor teacher says his kids show up in his class at 8:40. They feel that they work longer than the other two
They get out
levels.
at 4:10. No. At Howland Junior? Oh, well then it's 8:50. Because I know that it's been adjusted. It's 7.5. They may show up early and let them the classes maybe. I just know when I had an elementary and a junior high, I had trouble dropping off my junior high kid because my elementary went at 8:15 and I could not drop my junior high kid off until after 8:25. So we had to drive around for 10 minutes.
Bonding time.
No.
We digress. I'm going to go back to the original question. Does this board think we can narrow our options down for future consideration? Because eventually, someone's going to have to make a motion for a bell schedule if it's going to change. And it can't go much longer because I think when all these discussions started 6 months ago, we were told that if you don't do it by January, you're not adding bus routes. Correct me if I'm wrong from that workshop.
No, you need to order by January, February, the latest. March, you're pushing it.
I think option 5 and option 6 are a good direction to go in. Those are not drastic change and maybe easier to move into. But I also like the idea of being flexible with the high school, either shortening the day or lengthening the day or whatever needs to. I don't think we want to see anybody have to go to school after 4 p.m. But option 5 and 6 both still have either the junior or the high school there till 4:15. So if we're flexible, change some of those times on campuses. I don't know if we have to be a district of innovation to play around with the clock, but that might be an option as well. But I think, well, no, I'm the original option 5 and 6,
Okay,
which
well,
on this, I don't, okay.
The one that says 7:45 start time?
Let me look here.
That's
On
part
this
of A and
new
B.
paper,
number 2 and number 3.
What's the start time for elementary on the one you?
If you want to be flexible, I said
Miss Woods, what's the start time on the elementary one you're looking at?
they're both 7:45.
Okay, so
I'm on the new right one.
I don't have a 5 on my new one, so.
No, it's not on the new one. I'm sorry, I'm referring to that.
Okay.
So on the side-by-side comparison that you are looking at currently, option 2 and option 3. But I also like the idea of looking at the flexible high school with the 9 periods option.
It's called flex period.
Flex period.
9 freaks me out.
8 freaks me out.
We've been kind of going over this quite some time. I really think we need to have a workshop, and we need to have something on the agenda. Would you consider the school time at this week?
Well,
we've had 2, Mr. People, and that's why we keep coming back with all of this.
I understand that, but tonight, the start times is recommended by the administration.
Yes, sir, I understand that, Mr. People, and we're not making any decisions on the start time.
Well, I understand that, but I just think we need to.
Do we need to make a motion, give the administration direction for the next meeting on what recognition of Prince?
Well, I don't think you can, because that's not what the agenda item is.
Any final thoughts on item G, board?
I would just like to see some options in January that incorporate high school middle, high school later, and a flex period with some options.
Middle, later?
Last or middle. High school, a couple options, high school being the last group to go, and some being in the middle group.
Elementary.
I'm not giving you a number because I don't start over.
I'm just saying that we have to start over because these are them.
Take some of them. Give us 2 with high school being in the middle group. Give us 2 with high school being in the end and maximizing the 0 period. Give us some options. That's me.
Anyone else?
I'll make the motion if you like. I mean,
You don't need to make a motion. You're just putting future agenda items out there.
There's a future agenda item.
Not a motion.
Okay. Gotcha.
I don't think we need to see anybody going to school before 7:45, that's for sure, and we don't want to see them going after 4 o'clock.
I don't think it's feasibly possible to fill that schedule. Yeah. Dr. Duarte, to build us a schedule. No one starts before 7:45 and no one goes past 4.
The only concern I would say from an instructional standpoint is what Mr. Laredo said. We try and build our tutorials into the school day because it's really hard when you can't provide transportation to get the right children there for the tutorials outside of the school day. So all of the research says you try and build it in. So if we shorten the school day and we can't start any earlier, that's going to impact us in what we have to be able to provide instructionally for our students. So I just want to be really careful on thinking, let's go 6.5 hours and
No, I understand that completely. I just also know that the CDC and the American Association of Pediatrics say our kids should not be in school before 8:30. But here we don't.
That's junior high and above.
That's junior high and high school.
Not elementary.
Not elementary. That's junior high and high school. And the health impact is long term, and it can be incredibly impacting for our students.
Yeah, and I'm not saying anything
When you say
about the
7:15,
start
you mean
time.
secondary. 7:45, sorry. You said 7:45, you meant
She
secondary.
said nobody starts before 7:45 and no one goes past 4 is what she said.
Our elementary kids, I'm not trying to mess with that schedule that fits in there, and it's not something that 2.5 million students in the state of Texas go to school before 8:30 against all of the recommendations of the CDC and the American Association of Pediatrics. Our district and HISD are both talking about this issue right now because we recognize the importance and the value of the research
shouldn't the children and the parents of those children have a say as to what they think is best for their kids?
Sure, let's present them all the evidence.
Well, I thought we did that in public forum, and the surveys came back.
Half and half.
53% said, leave it alone, don't change. The other half all
the
had
high
different
school,
ideas.
If you put all of them together,
I am of the opinion that at the forum, you have, it's like everything else. You have a forum, the people that are against it are the ones that show up. The people that are probably like, okay, it doesn't matter to me, I'm not going to show up. So we had the vast majority of all three forums were attended from one high school. The vast majority. I'm not saying there weren't people from Sterling and Lee, but the vast majority were from GCM. And the vast majority of the kids that presented were AP kids who had the same teachers.
Well, I feel confident if we had gone to 9 o'clock 20 years ago and we were talking today changing to 7:15, those same people would be complaining about that too. Throw it out.
I was elected to serve my constituents.
I was elected to be a trustee, not a representative trustee.
and the majority of the people who spoke against it spoke against 9 to 4:30.
Yeah, the
only option that they focused on. And several of them even said, but if we had to choose one of those, I would choose, and at that time it was option 5 or option 6, because that only addressed a 1-hour time frame for the high school start time. So I think that the public forum is to be taken, as advice, but not necessarily complete advice.
Well, we have no motion on the table, so we've all expressed our opinions at this point. We can go forward, and somebody eventually, I guess, will make a motion for a bell schedule for next year. Don't know when that's going to be, because it's not going to be tonight.
But how can we make a motion for a bell schedule if it's not presented on the agenda?
I think the administration has enough to come back next meeting with some recommendations. They know what we're looking at.
Then we have to choose from that group of recommendations.
We have to trust the administration that they will take the information that we've expressed tonight, and they will bring forth some good recommendations with that information. I feel quite comfortable our administration will and can is 100% able to do that. If there are any clarifying questions, Mr. O'Brien can email us and ask us to clarify a few things. And the board president doesn't make the agenda next month.
With the budget implications.
With the budget implications.
Okay. Any other future board agenda items? Sir? No? Okay. Board trainings? Anyone want a board training? There's something Wednesday for people to get their legislative update if they've not done that. You sent out that information? Okay. I think I'm the only one who's come out and said I've had mine. Right. So everyone else understands you're supposed to be at a a legislative training this Wednesday evening.
Everybody but who?
Anyone who's already had it. I had mine.
Is this for next year or this year?
For the one the legislature that just ended this past summer, after the special session, everyone has to have an update. It's a 3-hour update.
I got SLI, didn't I? I'll give it, I'll go later.
Any future board meetings, changes to the board schedule that you would like to be considered, that was sent out by Ms. Garcia this week?
Board meetings?
Yeah, we're at board meetings now. Board meetings.
I would like for us to explore going to once a month.
Yeah. That would be.
Howard, yeah. I'll go with that in 2 days. I have a short
meeting. On there.
I guarantee you.
But that wasn't the question is, do you want to see any of the posted board meetings that we have posted on our calendar changed at this time?
Oh, my fault. I thought you wanted for the upcoming year.
No.
I was like, that's not
I just said we have 2 in January.
Doing that? My fault.
All right. We will now move into closed session. The board will now recess into closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Texas Governmental Code 5.5071, 551.072, 551.073, 551.074, 551.083. No action will be taken while the board's in closed session, and no action was taken while the board was in closed meeting. Back to action items. It says I closed meeting. J, reconvene into K. J, reconvene into open session. We're at K, consideration of the purchase of property.
I'd like to make a motion. We authorize the superintendent to go look at to bring us contract on land of approximately 50 plus acres north of I-10, along with the reimbursement resolution.
Second. I have a motion from Mr. Poppy, second from Mr. Clem, authorizing the superintendent to negotiate a contract for the purchase of land north of I-10, 50 acres of land with the reimbursement resolution to bring forward to the board. Is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All against, raise your right hand. The motion carries 6-1. L, personnel, Mr. O'Brien.
Administration recommends the board approve the elections as presented, 7 teachers, and the resignations and retirements as presented, 9.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Pete Poppy, second from Mr. Laredo to approve elections and resignations as presented. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay. One more item before adjournment. We would like to, in front of this large crowd, express the board's appreciation to Ms. Garcia for all that she does to us. Small total of our appreciation. Thank you, Norman, for everything you do. Oh my God! We had that discussion in her office the other day. Turn off that. Thank you. I seek a motion for number 9. Well, he moved it. Motion for Mr. Clem, second for Ms. Woods for adjourn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.